You know, the first thing that tends to happen is the sufferers do not even acknowledge. So that's a sad thing. They do not often acknowledge that they are actually undergoing some very nasty stuff in their relationships.
Absolutely.
You know, and this non-acknowledgement of it, then causes the impact to be far much more severe than you would imagine. When people tell you the kind of things that they experience, you wonder, why on earth did you remain in such kind of relationship?
I am super excited to have Dr. Joyce Nona Edeki on this show today. I am so excited. I am so happy. I just really want to welcome you, Dr. Joyce, to the Beautifully Broken Me podcast.
Thank you.
It's such a joy to have you here. I am you don't really know how happy I am. Thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
So I will really want you to, introduce yourself, fun facts, background, expertise, like anything you want the audience to know about you.
Okay. My name is Dr. Nona Joyce Edeki. I work as a consultant psychiatrist. I'm based in the United Kingdom. I'm a mother of 3 young men. The oldest is 29 and the youngest is 25.
Whoa.
I am a recent author of a book named Embracing Change Painlessly, Maximizing the Mind, Engaging God's Word. I am also a Christian. I'm a lay preacher. And I'm very fascinated about the working of the mind, as well as, how you can use scriptures to maximize the mind and enjoy everyday life. So I always say my slogan is, it's your choice to enjoy life no matter what. So that's me in a nutshell. And I love to talk about the mind. I love to talk about the Word of God. And if it can benefit one person, then I am fulfilled. So that's me. I'm also a podcaster. I have a podcast named The Mind Workout Gym. So you can always look out for that as well.
Absolutely. Like, honestly, you need to check her podcast out, The Mind Workout Gym. That is some very good content, very cool stuff, guys. So check it out when you have any time. Like, just, check out her podcast. I just once again, want to thank you so much, Dr. Joyce, for coming on. And concerning what we're talking about today, mental health and domestic violence. And we're just really looking at the mental state of the victims, the mental state of the victims of domestic violence during and after domestic violence. I just really want to know, like, what general insight would you like to give about this particular topic, being a psychiatric consultant?
Okay. Sadly, domestic violence is becoming even more prevalent in our society across ages. It doesn't matter whether you're a newlywed, doesn't matter whether you just have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Domestic violence is rampant and is being recorded in over 60%, and particularly since the lockdown in the last 14 months, there has been an upsurge, increased numbers of people, females and less so males, who have suffered with domestic violence. And the sad thing about domestic violence is it is a prolonged or protracted form of abuse, which can involve various aspects. It could be physical abuse, it could be emotional abuse, it could be psychological abuse. But over time, what tends to happen is it begins to impact and affect the physical, the mental well-being of this individual, and the overall ability to enjoy everyday life, because your self-esteem goes down. Not only that, you suffer with the consequences of the physical injuries that you may sustain in the course of the problem, of the course of the domestic violence, and the fact that, you know, the perpetrators of this domestic violence tend to use control and fear. You know, it really knocks on the ability of this individual to have the sense of self-worth. So their self-esteem, you know, goes down to nearly zero, if there is anything like that. And what happens is you tend to have somebody who now has a broken sense of the self. And when you have a broken sense of the self, it can affect your personality, it could affect every aspect of your being, your physical being, your mental well-being, your psychological well-being, and your mental health also is affected. So increasingly, people who suffer with domestic violence begin to experience sleep difficulties, they begin to experience anxiety disorders, begin to experience panic disorders, depression. And sometimes in very severe cases, they could actually also experience, you know, psychosis, you know, which is, you know, far much more severe form of spectrum of mental disorders. So as you see, it can affect the individual from mild cases right through to very, very severe cases where they have, you know, where they sustain serious physical injuries that can also impact on their well-being.
Wow.
So in a way, it is protracted trauma that is experienced by this individual over a period of time. And this, depending on the intensity and the severity of these abuse, can actually simulate like a post-traumatic stress disorder in most cases. And oftentimes people suffer with the consequences for a long time. And they do need to seek, you know, professional help in the first instance. You know, the first thing that tends to happen is the sufferers do not even acknowledge. So that's a sad thing. They do not often acknowledge that they are actually undergoing some very nasty stuff in their relationships.
Absolutely.
You know, and this non-acknowledgement of it, you know, then causes the impact to be far much more severe than you would imagine. When people tell you the kind of things that they experience, you wonder, why on earth did you remain in such kind of relationship?
Absolutely.
But they don't know. And that's a sad aspect of it, you know. And so, yes, so that is the long and the short of it of domestic violence. Like I said, can cause physical health problems. It can cause, you know, psychological problems. It can cause low self-esteem, depression. It can cause anxiety. It can cause post-traumatic stress disorder. It can cause severe sleep difficulties. It can cause, you know, even in very, very severe cases, psychotic states.
Wow.
So it is a serious situation. And some people have actually taken their lives. And some, unfortunately, have also lost their lives in the course of the domestic violence. So there is increased incidence of morbidity, which is the illnesses that you may suffer with, as well as increased incidence of mortality, deaths from domestic violence from the perpetrators, as well as even people just getting tired and say, you know what, they just take their own lives. So it is a serious problem, because oftentimes the perpetrators use the power of control to isolate the individual from all their social support and social network. And when this happens, then they can, you see, when you have a problem and you're able to share it with somebody, at least you can get some other perspective to the nature of the problem and then seek right kind of help. But when you are isolated from everyone that knows you or the support network that you have, it even becomes worse off.
Absolutely.
You know. I want
to just hear something a little bit like, you know, talking about this, just kind of like give me a little flashback of, you know, my story. So a little bit about my story, you know, being a domestic violence survivor, I really suffered from, you know, the mental state. Like, you know, it got to a point where my ex-spouse actually, you know, said that I had some spiritual problems. And I started to believe him. Like, you know, he said I had a spiritual mother. You know, I had his mom with us at that time. You know, we were all together in the same house, his mom, himself, and myself. And they said I had a spiritual problem. they said I had a spiritual mother, and they just kept constantly said it to me, oh, you have a spiritual mother. And I continue to believe them. And this is really the state of, the mental state of some domestic violence victim. When somebody constantly not physically, but verbally abuses you. And, and at some point when he said a piece of rag was much more valuable than me. And he called me and said, look at that piece of rag on the floor. And I'm looking at this, piece of rag. And he's like, this piece of rag is more valuable than you. Piece of rag could be used to clean up messes. You're simply worthless. And this is, and me at that time, I was this kind of a person who was trying to find herself, I haven't gotten married at my early 20s. I didn't know my left from my right. So having said that to me, like, I started to believe him, and he just continued saying it. And there's this thing that he kept on saying it until I finally lost my sense. I finally lost myself. Like I felt I was, to the point where I considered myself as worthless. So this is really what happened. And, when they kept on saying, you have a spiritual mother, to the point where I can't, when I cook, as a wife of the house, you just have to cook, right, for the family. And when I cook, they're going to be like, did you pray on that food? Did you say a prayer before eating that food? Before she gives us poison in this house, they're just going to say it to your hearing. And you know what, that happens. Like the first time I heard that, what I did was I was holding a cup, like a mug. I just kind of I didn't know when I dropped it on the floor. Like I just felt, oh my God, like it was just that. I was so shocked and surprised. And, I was, it was just really like the emotional roller coaster of, what was happening to me. And this actually brings me to the question I just wanted to ask, like, being a psychiatrist, you must have seen and consulted with victims who had various forms of mental health issues, some resulting from domestic violence. I'm just kind of wondering, how does domestic violence affect their mental health? Like, I know that with the little story I told you, you've just seen that. Just that little scenario affected my mental health, that even when I left the abusive marriage, I was still feeling inadequate. Like I was just still feeling like, I am not good enough. I am not good enough. And it doesn't matter what anybody tells me, like, oh, this is awesome. You did such an awesome job. Like, I just have this thing in me that would not want to accept what that person has said, because the person who's supposed to be the love of my life, supposedly, right, had talked me down to the point where I had considered myself as worthless. So I just really want to know, like, how does domestic violence affect the mental health of a domestic violence, victim or survivor?
Okay, so like you said, oftentimes because of the ongoing verbal assaults, verbal words that undermine your sense of the self, undermine your sense of integrity. That is your sense. Every human being has this sense of the self. It carries you, it carries your ability to say, that this is who I am, your identity, as it were. It helps you to have a formed image of your identity. But sadly, when you are in an environment where you're constantly being criticized, not even for anything that, even when you do good things, even when, like you said, when you were, cooking a meal for the family, which is a good thing that you were doing as a dutiful wife, you were being criticized, and even being accused of, poisoning the food and things like that. So is a constant undermining of yourself, of the individual. I mean, they're abused now. So the woman has very low esteem of themselves. And I always define self-esteem as a measure of value that you place on yourself. So if you do not have any sense of corroboration that you're worth anything, then there is a tendency, if you don't have a healthy sense of yourself, to actually begin to believe the abuser and the words that they are saying unto you. It can also happen even in the context of, of family members, just calling one names and things like that. It is a high and intense level of bullying, if I use the word, it is a high and intense level of bullying. And it is meant to undermine your sense of the self. It is meant to undermine your sense of what that measure of value you place on yourself. It undermines it, knocks on it so badly that there is nothing left for you to actually say that you are. And it does take a long time for victims to eventually build that sense of self-worth. And I always say, at the end of the day, it is a matter of the day that you realize that you are in a situation that is not healthy. That is the very day that your salvation comes, because then you know that you need to get out of that situation, of that, get out of the environment where, you're constantly being undermined, you're constantly being, treated like you said, a piece of rag was worth more than you as an individual who is supposed to be an equal partner, a helpmate to a man that you're married to. It is hugely undermining, and that is the part. That is the fundamental pillar that begins to knock on the other mental health problems that spiral out from the ongoing abuse. So from that, you now begin to suffer with, sense of worthlessness, sense of hopelessness. There isn't any hope for the future. Begin to experience low moods. You begin to experience, intense anxiety in your physical body, in your mind. You cannot concentrate. You cannot focus on doing anything meaningful and productive. At work, it begins to affect you. It begins to just play. It now begins. It's like an undertone music that is just being played, and this music is not a good one. It's just an echo of the negative things that has been said to you over and over and over again. And what happens is you find your mind being constantly interfering in those thoughts and those words you've heard through your ears. They begin to interfere in your mind. You cannot concentrate. You cannot focus, And when that happens, it also affects the sleep. Your sleep goes, the sleep of the individual goes. They begin to suffer with insomnia. It could be initial insomnia when anxiety is really bad, and later on it can affect, the sleep will become so interrupted, especially when oftentimes they wake them up. I mean, the perpetrators will wake them up from sleep and begin to beat them up or begin to, rain abuses upon them and what have you. So their sleep is disturbed so badly. And then they could have, times when they start waking up earlier than usual. If your wake up time usually is 7 o'clock, you notice that maybe for people sufferers, they'll begin to wake up at 4 a.m. and they just cannot go back to sleep, And while they're awake like that, what happens is there's just a play of those words over and over and over again in the mind. The mind cannot shut down just because of the negative thinking that all those words over time has now triggered these thoughts. The thoughts are negative thoughts about the self, negative thoughts about the future, negative thoughts about even your sense of identity. You begin to question it. Am I even worth living? Nobody even wants me. My parents don't want me. No family of mine wants. It becomes. It's like you now begin to relieve. You leave out the words that are being spoken over you day in and day out. And it's a terrible thing that can happen to any individual. And oftentimes, when this goes on for so long, there is this concept of hopelessness. No matter what I do, it's not going to make any difference. So you just give in.
It's true. Basically,
it just becomes a sense of helplessness. No matter what it is you do, it's not going to make anything better.
Why get it better? Why do it when it doesn't matter what I do. It won't be
You exactly, you know. So when that happens, obviously you begin to have significant, you know, features of depression, low moods, low energy. You don't want to do anything. You don't even want to go to work. You don't want to go out to socialize. You don't want to do anything that as a pleasurable activity. You find yourself, you know, constantly crying, you know, being moody, you know, and in some in very, very bad cases, some people can actually begin to hear the voices of their perpetrator, even in reality. So when things are beginning to reach this stage, then you begin to see that we are going into the realms of, you know, psychotic illness, and that is a severe form of the impact of domestic violence on the psyche of the abused.
Wow. It's, I don't, everything you're just saying was just ringing a bell to me, because honestly, like, haven't been married, you know, I was married at my early 20s. Honestly, like, I just literally got married after my undergrad. I did not know my left from my right. It was as if I was just like a flower that he just got plucked from from the garden, you know. I didn't know my left from my right. And everything you were just saying just put together, because I remember then I would wake up so early in the morning and I can't sleep. Like, I'll just be like, why am I awake? I'll wake up like maybe like 4 a.m. in the morning, looking at the ceiling. Like, I would try to sleep. I will pray. I will go take a glass of milk. I can't sleep. And everything that's coming in my head is just, you're not good enough. You're completely worthless. You can't do anything. You're just good for nothing. Like, all those things are just something that would just be re-echoing in my mind. And I'm like, oh God, you know, like, and before you know it, you know, I'll just start crying again. I'll just be like, well, you know, I'm not good enough. You know, this life isn't worth living for, you know, and all these things just kept on coming until one day when I attempted to take my own life. But I really give God praise that, you know, I'm doing this right now. You know, I am speaking out, I am sharing my story, and especially this platform, The Beautifully Broken Me, you know, changing anything that seemed to be broken in our life, you know, turning it into something beautifully amazing. And I just really give God praise that I was able to come out of it. And if you're listening to me right now, you will definitely come out of it. The decision is yours, definitely. It is solely yours, okay? But take strength, take courage, and just know that you can seek help. You can always reach out. Thank you so much, Dr. Nona.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate you for sharing. I just really want to know, is there a way survivors of domestic violence can recover from mental health issues without leaving a scar in them?
I kind of side there a little bit, because it depends on how bad things have gone. In as much as a lot of damage has been done. If you seek professional help, there is adequate treatment there. There is some pharmacological treatment. They could give you some medication to help, because what happens is over time, the negative style of thinking causes some chemical changes in the brain. So there's now chemical imbalances. So you may need to take some medication at the very initial stages when you seek for professional help. So that, what the medication tends to help do is to help correct those chemical imbalances. And then with that, you now get yourself a little bit prepared to deal with the talking treatment. So you now have some talking treatment as well. The talking treatment could be brief, it could be ongoing, but it's also very, very useful to have. Then you could have some social treatment. The social treatment can come in the way of, you know, you changing your circle of influence, you being in an environment, you know, you're surrounding yourself with people who affirm you, people see the beauty in you, the beauty in your character, the fact that there is nothing wrong with you, but you need that affirmation as an individual to begin to heal over time. And with there are some useful books out there that can help you, self-help books. A lot of meditation and mindfulness can help you to overcome some of the features of the impact of the domestic violence. So it's important to kind of seek the right kind of help, seek professional help. That is so important. Get treatment promptly. And as soon as you finish getting treatment, also go in to have some psychological support, psychological interventions. There's CBT, there is individual psychotherapy. There's a lot of other psychological interventions that are out there. There's trauma-focused, CBT that is directed, purely for people who have suffered with significant trauma as such in domestic violence. So there are those forms of interventions there. In very severe cases, sometimes, when people are experiencing psychotic symptoms and they are not responding to medication or to psychological intervention, they could actually give them some, shock treatment just to get them back to normal states, and for those who are believers, having Christians around you can be very, very useful because they form the support network that you have, and also using scriptures. And that's where, I come in. I kind of wrote a book, like I told you earlier at the beginning. I'm an author now. I wrote a book, which says Embracing Change Painlessly, Maximizing Your Mind, Engaging God's Word. So it is a book that kind of gives you the little things. Some of the things I've talked about here today are also contained in the book, ways in which you can help yourself, because at the end of the day, it is what you allow that will eventually begin to affect you. You know your identity, have an issue, you will be able to identify the early symptoms or early features of an abusive relationship. At the moment your instincts begin to tell you that there is something about this relationship that isn't right, girlfriend, run. Run. That is the word. Run. Seek for help. Identify for what it is and run, because it never gets better. It only gets worse. It doesn't take up to 5 minutes for the life of an individual to be snuffed out of them, So one attempt of physical beating can actually result in your death. So the earliest signs, the earliest features of a domestic violence or controlling behavior, which is the core feature that the perpetrators tend to use, run. There are many fishes in the ocean. You'll always find another man who will affirm you, who will recognize you as a helpmeet, not as a punch bag.
Whoa.
So seek help and run. That is the best way to prevent ongoing assault that can result in all those other mental health disorders that I described earlier.
Wow.
It's important to note that perpetrators are mainly people who have personality disorders such as narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorders. These are people who have, significant defaults in their psyche, in their sense of being. Okay, they have no value for other people's feelings. They have no empathy. They have a way to just control and exact their wishes on an individual to control them. So if you see things like that, it's not because a man loves you. No. If a man loves you, he doesn't need to control you.
Absolutely.
He doesn't need to control you. So when you begin to see features like that, girlfriend, run. That is the simple solution. Run as early as you can, whilst you still have breath in you, and when you still have hope to be able to turn things around for yourself. So that is what I can say about, what to do and how you can get help. And remember, the longer you are in a domestic abusive relationship, the longer the impact on your sense of self, on your personality, on your mental health.
Whoa.
So if you leave earlier from such a relationship, then the impact is not as bad. Does that make sense?
Oh, that is
so
like
the longer you stay in an abusive relationship, the worse, as it were, the prognosis may be. But the good news, like I always say, is this: there is hope.
Absolutely.
And I've seen a lot of women who have survived and who have turned out a different leaf eventually, and they made something out of themselves. So you can do it with the right kind of support, but you need to seek that support. You need to take yourself out of that relationship and seek for the right kind of help.
Wow. Honestly, wow. It's just like a drop mic moment. Like it's just what it is. Like there's a lot of work. When you come out of it, it doesn't leave you automatically. You have to do some work. Like I am still working on myself. I am still doing some work. Like I did therapy. I did coaching. Like I had coaches. I did social group with people with the same domestic violence. Like I constantly would affirm myself. Like I surrounded myself with people who believe in me. Like there's so much that is to be done, because before you go back to that, your original state, you just really have to put in a lot of work. And honestly, I just really want to thank you so much, Dr. Nona. Thank you so much for, all this very insightful nuggets that you've just, given us. I really appreciate it. I'm just kind of wondering, while I was in my abusive marriage, I was enduring my marriage, I was wishing, I was praying, I was just kind of wishing and, hoping that one day things will turn out well. There's some listeners who are domestic violence victims and, they're silently depressed, silently enduring their marriage, possibly wishing and praying that things will turn out well. And I'm just wondering, are there some silent time bomb illnesses that could surface when a person is constantly abused, traumatized, stressed, depressed, devastated, and emotionally drained? Like somebody in this category, like I'm just wondering, like, could there be? I know we talked about, some of them, but could there be any other time bomb illness that could just boom, especially when the stress level is so high? When there's always this fight or flight moment, he comes in and your heart is palpitating because you're like, oh my goodness, I don't know if he's going to whack me. Like, especially for me, whenever he comes in, like he has this thing, he doesn't like to see hairs. So whenever he's outside, I am scanning everywhere. I am looking at the floor. I am trying to rearrange a house that is not messy. Like I am trying to sweep or do anything just to make sure that he doesn't find anything. And definitely, trust me, he will always find something. And I'm just like, no one deserves to live like this. So I'm just wondering, like, could there be any like silent time bomb illnesses that would surface? Do you?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the physical health problems, because now we're looking at the physical health problems, it is just exactly because how the mind interprets this over is stress. So it is stress, and stress will affect the human body. You could develop, the individual can develop hypertension, raised blood pressure. That can, eventually result in sudden stroke. It can, the individual can develop, other health conditions. Because like I said, over time, just the resultant way of thinking can begin to affect the physical body. in such a way that, like, in this, my book, I talked about what they call cell-to-cell communication. Every cell in the human body communicates with one another.
Whoa.
If the thoughts in your brain, in the brain, are constantly negative thoughts, there is harm coming, there is threat, there is something horrible going to happen all the time, that in other words, you're in a constant state of tension, the brain will be sending such messages to the body. And what happens is, over time, there will be increased levels of certain hormones. Adrenaline is what your body produces when you're just in a state for survival, when you have to either quickly escape a dangerous situation. But in this case, it is perpetual. So adrenaline will be excessive. That's why eventually over time hypertension will develop. Not only that, cortisol levels will be raised. Cortisol is the hormone which is good to manage stress in the short term. However, with excessive and prolonged stress, cortisol levels are raised excessively over prolonged time. And this is not good. It will begin to affect the kidneys. It begins to affect, every aspect of the human being.
Wow.
And eventually feeds into the depression and all the other mental health disorders. So because the mind and the body, they are intricately connected in such a way that what's happening to one side cannot but affect the other aspects. Wow. So your cells communicate with one another. If your thinking begins to improve, again, the cells, which take a long time, but the cells begin to communicate that to one another. Okay, things are okay now, but it should take a while for them to get rid of the excess of all the hormones that have been brought about by prolonged and excessive stress. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So that really kind of makes me wonder.
In addition to all those you can have tensional headaches, you could have migraines, you could have, just name it, various physical health conditions. Some people have developed even diabetes mellitus over time, So it's like even cancer can eventually become, any organ in the body becomes more highly susceptible to, becoming cancerous. And what happens in cancer? The cells just refuse to listen to the signals from the brain to do what they should do. Like I told you, the cells communicate with one another. It gets to a state where, because they are exposed to these toxic chemicals that are excessive in the body, the cells just go, they now have a mind of their own. They do what they like. And that's what happens in cancer. They don't obey the rules anymore. They now begin to do their own thing. And these are in very, very severe cases. And it's sad, but yes, it happens. So you could have any of those conditions happening in this individual who also may be experiencing those mental health symptoms. So it will affect the physical body, it will affect the mental health as well.
Wow. I just wanted to kind of add to something, and it's more like in form of a question, but just out of curiosity, you find some people who will tell you that in my relationship, I am emotionally checked out. So they're saying, I am emotionally checked out in this relationship, but they're not out of it, but they're just emotionally checked out. And from what you're saying that I cannot be emotionally checked out and be 100% all right? Is that what you like? I just really want you to touch a little bit on that.
Even though you are emotionally checked out, if you don't take yourself out of that environment, the effect on your body, on your physical health and your mental health will still persist. Yes, like I said, your cells talk to one another. So what you've perceived over time, the cells, the moment the person begins to talk, your brain just begins to fire messages, to your cells. And this communication goes from one cell to the other. This is what is being said now. This is what is being said now. And they react. They react, and in the reaction, that's when they release all those hormones in a way to kind of try to protect you. But over time, because it's excessive and it's prolonged, this protection no longer becomes protection. It now becomes even something that will harm the physical health as well as harm the mental well-being.
Oh, wow.
So you can, even though you emotionally switch off, that is still not as good as taking yourself, your whole body, away from the environment of the abuse.
Wow.
So that you emotionally check out doesn't, in fact, if anything, it can actually infuriate the abuser and make them, change tactic, and then, begin to even become more violent. So it's important for you, for any individual who is out there at this time experiencing any form of control, to seek help, name it for what it is, and run. I don't know how to emphasize that more than this. Run. That's the word, run. And you need to run and hide as well, because these perpetrators, they can be very intense.
Absolutely.
They go around to seek for you, find you wherever you go. And not because they care, but because they would just want to bring you back into these abusive relationships. So one needs to be very, very careful. Seek help. I mean, the good news is, there are a lot of NGOs and non-profit organizations that are out there helping people right now. They have shelter homes, for example, and they have, hostels where people can, at least, go to hide in a short term, and then eventually, sort them whilst they're trying to sort themselves out and seek the necessary help that they need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Nona. When you talked about it, it just kind of made me remember, while I was at the shelter, at the point where I felt like if I continue to stay here, I would die, because I had attempted suicide, and I just knew that if I don't kill this guy, he might kill me. And what would happen? One of us would have been in prison right now. I just literally fled, and I fled to shelter, So it's really, the choice is yours, basically. The choice is, if you're listening to me right now, honestly, the choice is yours. Okay.
Yeah.
You can love somebody from afar, but you just want to be alive first of all. You want to be alive, you just want to be able to be alive, to be able to share your story, to be able to live, this life is precious, and we can't trade it for nothing. We just can't give it. It's not his, right? So we can't just suffer in silence. We just really need to seek help and reach out. So we're about wrapping up, though. I just really, really want you to give your counsel to listeners. I know you've touched a little bit about it, but just give your counsel to listeners who have silently lost their mind. I know a couple people who are survivors, and they have this autoimmune disease because of all the things that had happened in that relationship, and they stayed there for too long, and now it's like they're having this autoimmune disease. I just want you to give your counsel, give your advice to these listeners who have silently lost their mind and who are negatively impacted. This has really negatively impacted them. What would you really, really say to these people?
I mean, in this category, I'll also be mindful to think that there are some women who have children. It's easy for you to run if you're alone, if you don't have children yet, for the perpetrators. But when you have children, it becomes even a double whammy, because as a mother myself, the women will now begin to feel that, if they take the children away, how are they going to cope if they run away? And if they run away, how can they hide with the children? How can they protect their children? So then some of them will now say, well, it's better for me to just remain here. But that is good, because you have a responsibility. You brought those children to this world, and you have a responsibility to be alive, to take care of those children. If you notice and you know that your husband or your spouse is abusing you, is being violent towards you, physically, emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise, I will advise you go to one of these shelters, run with your children, run as soon as you can. I can't say that enough, because a lot of women have lost their lives because they have remained in such environments. And the sad thing that happens is the lasting damage this now has on the children is not worth it.
Absolutely.
The children will eventually not have either or both parents' life. Because if the man kills the woman, then the man will go to prison, and then the children will now end up not having the parents, and then they now suffer. They sometimes they are put in homes where they suffer even far much more. Some of them eventually have, better experiences. But the point is, you as a mother, you have a responsibility to be there for your children, to be alive, to take care of your children. So seek for help. Thank goodness we have a lot of information on the internet now. Go on Google, search, find, where they have shelters, and run. Find a friend, find a family member whom you can, confide in. Tell them what is happening. Do not keep silent. Do not keep silent. A problem shared is half solved.
Absolutely.
So always seek for opinion from experts, seek for help for yourself, seek for help for the children, because they also suffer with a significant emotional impact from the domestic abuse that the mothers experience. So seek for the right kind of professional help. Run away from the man, and be there for your children. Wow. If God has given you those children, definitely He will give you the resources to take care of the children. So let that not be a reason for you to remain in an abusive relationship. Run.
Wow.
That is my candid advice to you. Run. And I'm sure with the right kind of help over time, you will get better. You will be able to stand on your feet. You will be able to tell your story to help other people. And most importantly, you will be an overcomer, but not one of the statistics that we end up hearing every day over the news. So the decision you make today, the choices you make today, have far-reaching consequences, not only for yourself, but also for your children, both for now and for their future. So do something.
Oh, that is the drop mic moment. Do something.
Yeah.
Something. I am grateful to God for those shelter homes. Honestly, that was really where I was able to. That was my starting point, basically, because, being in the US, I had no family. I had literally, I had no friends. So God bless those people those people who initiated the idea of having a shelter home. That was a safe haven for me at that time. So there are places like that. It's very, very important to, go there. There's a lot of resources, like Dr. Nona has said, just reach out, seek help, do not die in silence. We're about getting to the conclusion. I just really want to know, what's your last and final word? What would you want to leave us with? And please do not forget to tell us where we can get your book, so we can absolutely go find it. And
Okay. I would say, the interesting thing is, there is a lot of resources out there for you that you can use to build your sense of the self, your self-worth, your self-esteem. The book which I've written recently has a lot of nuggets in it. I'll put it up now. That is the book there. It's Embracing Change Painlessly, Maximizing the Mind. And the author is Dr. Nona Joyce Edeki. So get yourself a copy of the book. It will help you. And there are also other useful resources out there. Go on Google. There are a lot of information, a lot of help. Podcasts that are out there that you can also listen to that can help you. But the important thing is take action. No matter how little that action is, take it. And remember, like I always say, it's your choice to enjoy life no matter what. Even in the face of domestic violence, it's your choice to either remain there or run.
Wow.
Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much.